Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our regular board meeting. And I would like to call this meeting to order. I need an approval of the consent agenda, please.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Guthrie. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Okay, we're going to move on to our school highlights, and that will be our National Culinary Student Ambassadors.
All right. So just to share some information about this honor. So our Educational Foundation collaborated with our CTE program and Taco Boy to coordinate some impactful giving. The foundation worked with Taco Boy to identify curated ways to give that would benefit our students, while also aligning with Taco Boy's goals and focus on community relationships. First, I would be remiss if I did not share that Taco Boy donated $10,000 for a STEM lab at Joseph Pye Elementary. This has boosted exposure to elementary students and provided resources including 3D printers and robots, which are designed to spark interest and fuel innovation for our elementary learners. Now, I would like to ask Kyle Mann and Madison Carson to please come up. And as they come up, I'll share that Taco Boy sponsored our first National Culinary Ambassadors from Somerville High School. They went through an in-depth application process last spring. If you would come to the front here. They went through a process last spring that included a video submission and interviews with leaders from the district and Johnson & Wales. They spent time shadowing Taco Boy leadership to learn all aspects of running a successful restaurant and business. Taco Boy paid for their attendance at the American Culinary Federation National Convention in July. And this convention is for high-level chefs from around the globe, which gave them an up-close look at best practices. Throughout the year, as seniors, Kyle and Madison will be showcased to promote students taking culinary and CTE classes and the value of real-world partnerships. Kyle and Madison study under Somerville High School culinary instructor, Chef Eric Huff. Brittany Chase, the general manager of Taco Boy Somerville, is here this evening. The district and foundation are grateful for partners like Taco Boy that are making true impacts for our students. The foundation looks forward to expanding the ambassador program to bring learning to life for our students. I would also like to invite up our foundation executive director, Ralph Hayes, Dr. Greg Harrison, our Executive Director of Special Programs, and our Assistant Director of CTE, Mark Blacklock, please.
Okay, next on our agenda is public comments on agenda items. And our first up is going to be Erica Miller.
Good evening. Tonight I want to talk about the policy BG/BGD, which is Board Policy Process / Board Review of Administrative Rules, which reads in part, proposals regarding policies may originate with board members, the superintendent, staff members, parents, students, consultants, civil groups, advisory committees, or any resident of the district. All proposals, including those from external sources, will be presented in writing and given to the superintendent for review. Upon recommendation from the superintendent, the board will examine proposals prior to acting upon them. This policy wording either suggests that parents in the community must submit their policy requests in writing to the superintendent, or they can submit to the board and the board will submit them to the superintendent. The language needs clarified. Who is the public submitting their requests to? If we submit them to the board, this policy should state that. If we're submitting to the superintendent, I'm going to have an issue with that. The public elects board members, and the public should have access to the board to present policy change requests at public meetings or in writing to the board. The way this policy is currently written is anti-parents, anti-community, and it lessens transparency by moving policy review to the superintendent instead of the policy committee, which operates in open meetings. I request this policy to be sent back to the policy committee to include that the public can suggest policy changes through a public meeting or a written correspondence to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Okay, next up is Jennifer Bendetti, sorry about that.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Bendetti, and I am a parent here in DD2. I have a son that's graduated from Ashley Ridge and a daughter who's a senior. I've been very involved with the PTSA boards at Beach Hill Elementary, Gregg Middle School, Ashley Ridge High School, and I've also volunteered at Rawlings. So, been around a while, and I'm very interested in what goes on in our district. I want to welcome you, Mr. Robbins, to our district. I think you've been doing phenomenally, and just good job, in case anyone hasn't told you. I wanted to also piggyback on what Ms. Miller was just saying. I'm concerned with how the policy is written, and I think that parents and community members should be able to continue making suggestions directly to the board. I don't feel that we should have to go through the superintendent, although he does a great job. I think that it could bring forth inefficiencies, that it could slow down the process of getting things accomplished, and I just think it's a negative precedent to set. Not allowing parents and community members to bring forth policy changes does not promote transparency, and it does not promote a positive working relationship between the school board and the community. So thank you for listening to me, and I would ask that that be clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bendetti. Okay, next on, there's nothing on here. I know, but I don't have anything on there. No details. Okay, next on the agenda is the board chair's report. And we had discussed at our last board meeting about some upcoming meetings that are in the works. And I would just like to remind the board members of those conferences that are coming up. And if you have not looked on the website and decided if those are some that you would like to attend, please do so that you can get with Ms. Smith so that we can get your reservations made for those conferences. So if you could do that and do that as quickly as possible, because those dates are coming up and the spots are filling up. So, okay. And then next on the agenda is our superintendent's report. We're going to turn that over to Dr. Robbins.
Well, he had asked to be placed on the agenda. Oh, you are here. I'm sorry, Chair. Come on up, please. We've got the county council chair here, is asked to present to the board. You were hiding.
Hey, good afternoon. Hiding in plain sight. Sorry about that. Good afternoon. And I know having another elected official here is horrifying because, I could stay here forever, but I'll keep it brief. But thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm Bill Hearn, Chairman of Dorchester County Council, and want to talk about the transportation penny referendum that's on the ballot for November 8th. I think several folks in the room will regard that as the second most important thing on the ballot on November 8th. I know the district has a pretty important election that day as well, but in my 22 years on county council, this is probably the most important thing we've tackled because, quite honestly, the future of the county, our ability to really plan, get some things done is going to ride on the outcome of this referendum. And I'll do it real quick. I'm sure you're aware of this, but just in case, in 2004, our citizens voted for a transportation penny for roads projects, which was implemented in 2005. And I'll stop right here and say, just point out, again, this was implemented in 2005. It's been in place for 17 years. This is not a new tax. People are calling this a tax increase. This is a continuation of the existing penny that's been in place since 2005. I probably could stop right there, but keep going a little bit further. The original penny was set up for 25 years. We very uber conservatively predicted revenues in the range of $180 to $200 million, which back then seemed like a lot of money. It really did, I know. Those that are thinking, well, didn't the Berlin-Myers Phase 3 cost $135 million? Why, yes, it did. But we felt like we could raise $180 to $200 million. The Department of Revenue requires us to put a statutory cap on that, and we set that cap way back then at another very conservative figure, $305 million. By 2020, it became apparent that we were going to hit the cap much earlier than we thought we were. Again, the sunset on this penny is set for 2029, and here we are by 2020, and we're coming right up on this cap. We were told by the Department of Transportation, and I'll say this, I have no ill will against the DOT. They have their priorities, so do we. That they would not have funding for Orangeburg Road until the year 2036, okay? And we were also told earlier this year by the Department of Transportation to not expect any money for the time being. And again, they have their priorities, and we're not going to complain about those priorities. Their two main priorities are to widen I-26 from here to Columbia and to widen I-95 from the Georgia line to Walterboro. That's where they're putting their money. Unfortunately, they're not putting it here. So we've got to do something. And also, just so you know, up to this point, over the 17 years that we've had this referendum, 75 to 80% of the roads projects that we have done are state roads. So we kind of find ourselves in the state road business. But all that being said, we started working on a plan in early 2022 after vetting this with the Department of Revenue. They authorized us to put the continuation of this transportation penny on the ballot this November 8th. The continuation of the penny will mean that we'll be able to work on an updated list of projects while completing just one carryover project, which is Highway 78, which is about halfway done. And if you're wondering, you heard me mention the Berlin-Myers Phase 3. The money for the Berlin-Myers Phase 3 is already dedicated. So we technically have 2 debt service payments that are coming up over the next year. That money's already there, so we will not be using any of this continuation penny toward the Berlin-Myers Phase 3. With the exception of Highway 78, everything else will be new projects. The current penny will end on, if it passes, the current penny will end April 30th of 2024. The continuation of the penny will start May 1st of 2024, literally the next day. So the Department of Revenue, and you might imagine if you're in the retail business, if you're having to collect taxes, you don't want to shut it down and start over again. It is seamless. It will go from one day to the next. And the good news is this: the Department of Revenue has also allowed us, if this passes, to use bond anticipation notes in the year 2023. So as early as next year, we would be able to use the bond anticipation notes. Specifically, and kind of a low-hanging fruit example of this would be Maple Street Extension, which I know no one ever gets stuck out there. You know, I'm sure it's not on anybody's mind. Just kidding, obviously. But we'll be able to throw money into that project with the town of Somerville, get that thing going. And obviously, if you're doing that, it makes sense to continue down Parsons, down Central, down to Orangeburg Road. And that's just a part of the roads. Obviously, Highway 78, Dorchester Road. There are roads all over the county that will be able to get done as a result of this. There's a big difference in this referendum. Way back in 2004, we were required to put together a list in 2004 that represented 22 projects. It was literally the entire 25-year project list in 2004. You might imagine priorities changed, the needs changed, and we were stuck. We learned a valuable lesson, which is don't do 25 years. So this time we're doing 15 years. 15 years by law gives us the ability, when we hit the cap or whenever necessary, to request an extension of that penny. You notice I am calling it, and you're hearing it referred to as a continuation, because the Department of Revenue will not allow us to call it an extension. I'm not sure the exact difference between extension and continuation, but we have a continuation. If it passes, we'll then get to do an extension. Can't explain it, but that is the Department of Revenue's rule. So in addition to the 15 years, the bonding capacity on this is $400 million. The cap is $735 million. A little bit different from that 180 to 200 million. The value of the penny has quadrupled. When we started, it was approximately $7.5 million a year. Right now, it is just a shade around under 29 million, and it has grown every year except 2. So there's been a very consistent growth on this. We are being very conservative, though. We're not assuming big growth. Just the very conservative look out over the 15 years will hit the numbers that we are seeing. And you may have seen this, and if you want to, folks, you can go to the Dorchester County website. You can actually see both the explanation and the proposed referendum on the website, right on the first page. The allocation will be $700 million for transportation and $35 million for Greenbelt projects. That is how that is set up at this time. And what's interesting about it is this: we are not married to a list of projects like we were the first time. This is a big change from the Department of Revenue. They originally said whatever you put on that list is all you can do. This time we can add to the list. And I'll also say we can subtract from that list. If you are following this, we had on the ordinance what is called the Ladson Road Extension. And if you ask me to show you plans of that, I can't because they don't exist. But people didn't like it, so we took it off. So we've given first reading to removing that particular item off of the ordinance. And that just shows you the flexibility that we have. We can add, we can take off. Honestly, by 7-8 years into this, we could have and should have been able to, for example, to add Orangeburg Road to that, but we couldn't. This time we can do that. We'll have a lot more flexibility. So the way this is set up is a lot better, I think, going forward. All right, 2 takeaways. Repeating, again, this is not a tax increase. Again, the penny's been in existence for 17 years. Number 2, this is the only way to get our roads done for the foreseeable future. DOT has stated that their priorities are elsewhere. And that's kind of the very long and short of this. I will answer any questions if you have any. Again, if you would like, you can go to the county website, which discusses it further. We have already done our 3 readings. We had a public hearing on this. We've met our notice requirements, and we are headed to November 8th. So our fingers are crossed. And I do appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you so much. It's great being here. I love what you've done with the place, guys. Thank you.
Ms. Crosby?
Bill, thank you for coming tonight and
Yes,
explaining that to us. So it would be less than 14 years to get Orangeburg Road done? Because that's a nightmare out there, especially with these high schools turning loose and schools. Whoa.
Yes, ma'am. Again, you're talking, DOT was giving us 2039. That's probably not even realistic for them to have gotten started on it. So we feel very confident that we can get it done before 2039. It is, I will say this, just to give some heartburn in the room, the 2019 build-out cost on it was $135 million. That $135 million number just pops up on occasion. It's kind of amazing. I'm afraid, Barbara, it's going to cost a little bit more than that. But again, that is a project that has such huge implications, evacuation routes. It's, you know, the ability to get to and from work. And yes, we're sending more and more employees and industry west heading up Highway 78. So that's a pretty critical thing. So by all means, yes, we will. The goal is to get it done sooner. There's some shovel-ready projects. Maple Street would be one of those. But there's just smaller projects that are out there. And without saying it, you said it and I appreciate it. We're going to be able to, for example, Dr. Robbins, if you need a road done in and around a school, we'll have the ability to do that this time. We couldn't do that last time. So, you know, obviously not only does this impact the schools by virtue of doing some arterials and some bigger roads, but it's also going to give us the flexibility to do some smaller projects as well. Frankly, those are easier, faster, and cheaper. So that's kind of the upside of that. So, but yes, do we plan on doing it before 2036? Absolutely, yes, ma'am. Because once that Maple Street extension happens, it's going to drive traffic out toward Orangeburg, and we've got to deal with that. Yes, ma'am. Whoops, excuse me.
Mr. Hearn, Dr. Robbins and I sat on the original committee to kind of brainstorm and decide roads that were in need. And we actually rode around to all of our schools and came up with a list of needs that we thought we had. Do you know if there are any of those that we had identified, if they are on that list?
And I think the answer is some of the roads are, but it doesn't mean they will not be able to get done.
To go further.
What's interesting about this, and I'm being a little blunt about this as I say this, instead of having that all-inclusive list, it's on the referendum, you'll see projects of regional significance and projects of local significance. And just because a project didn't rate in terms of its sex appeal, if you will, it's still able to get done. So, and appreciate both of you participating in this. The Chambers of Commerce participated. Mm-hmm. Our friends up in District 4 participated. All the mayors in the county have participated. They all have lists of projects, and they're all fair game. And I've had plenty of folks go, well, are you going to do anything to help us? And I said, call us. This is going to be a big difference this time in terms of our ability to be a little bit more nimble. We're not going to be so rigid. We're not going to be so married to that list that, frankly, didn't help you guys at all, really.
Right.
So.
Well, thank you for allowing us to participate, because there were several needs that we identified, and we're hoping that if they didn't make that list, that at least when you're over in those areas, that you can, venture into some of those areas.
Absolutely, so. And we certainly remember meeting with you and discussing some of those roads, and I mean, really everything's fair game. Over 15 years, things change very dramatically, so the priorities will change. So.
Right. Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
Well, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Have a good evening.
Thank you very much for joining us and giving us all that great information.
Well, again, thanks for the time. Thank you.
We, we have to keep the schedule going because, and then you're able to do a public comment or whatever after that if you filled out a comment card. But I think, Mr. Hearn,
I've got to do this again tonight. Is it okay? Will you follow me out? I'll be
I was
happy
getting ready to
talk
say,
you
if you
one-on-
could talk with her maybe before. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, good evening, members of the board. Pretty excited to give you guys an update on where we are with the LEAP program, which is the employee after-school program that we talked about for childcare. Trying to separate that out from our actual extended day and meet the needs of not only just our employees, but maybe more community members. So if you remember last time when I was speaking, I shared with you the data of the number of people. We have over 1,400 students that are involved in the program itself. And of those, there are roughly 193 that are employees' children and about 354 that are interested in the program that could not take advantage of it. So I sent a survey out last week. We collected data. Just looking to see how many employees may actually take advantage of it. Originally, I told you we may need to utilize regional locations based on the number of students in the program, but that was just our first look. And so by sending this email out, we were able to gather some data. And like I said, currently there are 193 employees, children. And when I say employees, I'm not talking about just teachers. I'm talking about all employees in the district that are utilizing the extended day program. There were 354 who said that if it was available, they would take advantage of it. And so that, to me, that right there in itself is a big boost because we can pull those 193 out who are only paying partial fees, and we can allow our community members who are on the wait list to take advantage of the program. By doing so, then I was able, and I wish you could see it, and it's not up on the screen, but I'll send it to you later. But I broke it down per building to see exactly how many students in each one of our elementaries there would be, because I know you received a couple messages of, I don't want to leave my building to go pick up my child. Well, once we collected all that information, we have enough kids that would participate in the program that we will be able to have an employee LEAP program in every single one of our elementary schools, so we would not have to utilize transportation to move them out of the buildings. One of the other things, too, that is important to note is there'll be no cost to it. It'll be a $5 weekly administrative fee, which is simply just to help us get stuff that would be fun for the kids to do while they're in the program. And we're going to start off with the hours being right after school until 6 o'clock. Some teachers, some employees may be coaches. They may sponsor extracurricular activities, clubs. So they may be otherwise occupied and they need that service. And if they don't, then they can go pick their child up whenever they're finished at work and take their child home. But we wanted to maximize the opportunity for employees utilizing it if they need to. If we see that there's nobody really in the program past 5, then we'll work those hours back and move it backwards that way. But at least it gives them that flexibility so they don't have to seek childcare outside of what we're providing them in the school district. So again, the numbers look really great. The one thing I've shared with a couple people in our extended day program, there's a certain adult to child ratio that we must maintain because that's a grant funded program that we don't have to maintain in our own. Now, that's not to say that we would pack so many kids in there that we'd create a safety issue, but we have a little bit more flexibility based on the number of students at each location, and we would try to secure the number of adults necessary. So again, feel very excited that this is going to be something we're going to be able to do rather quickly. The goal would be really honestly to not have things up and running until after the start of the year, after Christmas, the start of the new year. That would allow us to get supervisors in place, have a program in place, exactly how we're going to do this. Plus, some people are probably locked into their current child care services as well. So, happy to answer any questions on that.
Any comments or questions?
who will supervise that? Who will be in each one of the buildings? A teacher?
No, it won't necessarily be a teacher. It could be a cadet teacher. It could be a YMCA representative. We're working with a bunch of different people to sponsor the program and work with us. They will be paid, so we'll pay them, but not necessarily a certified teacher. Prefer it not to be a certified teacher.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Robbins, we will be one of the only districts in the Low Country offering free after-school care for our educators.
That is correct.
So talk about a recruiting and retention opportunity. So I hope everybody heard that. Please pass that along. Dorchester District 2, one of the only ones with that opportunity. So thank you for putting that in place.
Yeah, we're excited about it. So I know some of our teachers are excited as well, so I look forward to it. Okay, the next item I have on the superintendent's report tonight, and bear with me, I'm going to read it, but this has seemed to come up quite a bit since I've come to Dorchester County, but it's the question about civics education in our schools. And so I always, whenever I get those questions, I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I always refer to board policy. And so I referred both to board policy and I referred to statute. And the statute guides and directs what we do for civics education in South Carolina. I think some of us who are a little older, we took a civics class, but that's changed over the years, and now it's embedded into the curriculum starting at a very young age. So the very first one is South Carolina Code 59-29-120, and it's study of United States Constitution requirements for graduation, attendance at veterans activities. And it reads this: all public high schools must give instruction in the essentials of the United States Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Emancipation Proclamation, and the Federalist Papers. No student in any such school may receive a certificate of graduation without previously passing a course that includes instruction in the provisions and principles of the United States Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Emancipation Proclamation, and again, the Federalist Papers. And so those are our high school courses that are required by the South Carolina Department of Education. So you all have been on the board long enough, you'll know that when they recommend to the superintendent that they've met all the requirements by South Carolina for graduation, that means they've taken this course. The second statute is 59-29-155, and it's the founding principles, instruction required, reporting requirements, and professional development. And it states this: the State Board of Education and Education Oversight Committee shall incorporate instruction on the founding principles that shape the United States into the required study of the United States Constitution as provided in Section 59-29-120 and the South Carolina Social Studies Standards upon the next cyclical review. The board and committee shall include, at a minimum, the Federalist Papers and the instruction on the structure of government and the role of the separation of powers and the freedoms guaranteed by the Bill of Rights to the United States Constitution. And again, I know that sounds like, a little bit of gobbledygook, but it's embedded in the standards that we have to abide by, and that's where we receive our accreditation. So I do have our staff counsel here that could probably help me answering questions. So what questions do you have?
The only thing I was concerned with is, we've been told that before, that they're embedded and they're in all of these courses, but then we've had so many parents come forward and say, our kid doesn't know anything about the Constitution. So I don't know whether teachers' fault, I don't know where it falls, but that's the reason that came up, is because we've heard, not from just one or two, but we've heard over the years that they don't know anything about the Constitution.
Hi, I'm Christy Sealander, Assistant Director of Secondary Schools. When Dr. Robbins is talking about these standards being embedded into the courses, starting at a very young age, that's true. Really starting in kindergarten, going up through primary school, civics is embedded into every course. Really, when you look at specifically the elements of the Constitution, 4th grade, 5th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade are where you see the most of those items within the actual state standards. So any course that is studying specifically United States history is where you're going to see a lot of that. So it would be very difficult for a student to get out of any one of those classes and not have had some extensive study of the Constitution.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
We have had parents that have said that, so it sounds like maybe it's falling through the cracks in some classes. Do we also have state constitution or state standards of our state government at all in a certain grade level? Do we do that? It's third grade, I think, yeah.
Yeah, third grade and eighth grade typically is where they study a lot about South Carolina history itself, and really South Carolina not just on its own, but as one of part of the United States. So they really are integrated together. But I really would recommend any parent that feels like their student should be learning about the Constitution and it's part of that particular grade level state standards, and they're not seeing it, to first start with a conversation with the teacher to find out when are these standards going to be taught. Because we do want to make sure that the standards are taught. We have a lot of teachers that work really hard. We have social studies content interventionists for elementary school, for middle school, and for high school. And these interventionists work directly with the teachers in all of the schools to make sure that what they're teaching in the classroom is aligned with the state standards. So when they sit down and they plan their lessons, they plan their assessments, they have the state standards and the curriculum guide right in front of them.
Thank you.
So that's our goal.
Okay. Ashley?
So when they teach about the Constitution, do the students also read the Constitution, or is it just teaching about it?
They read it. They read excerpts. I don't know that there's any one particular course where they sit down and read the entire document. I'm not sure that many of us would sit down and read the entire document at one go. Sometimes it's easier to take something like that that's pretty complex and break it up into chunks. But yes, it is part of that classroom instruction.
Because I think that could be part of the confusion. People are saying they haven't read the entire thing, and that may be true from, top to bottom, but they're more breaking it into chunks that the students kind of...
Right, that's correct, especially thinking about an elementary level, 4th or 5th grade. Imagine taking a document like the Constitution and saying to a student, we're going to read this entire thing like that. It would be very, very difficult for students to understand. So taking something like that and breaking it into chunks is really a great way to help kids understand those concepts.
And then in any of the classes where it's being taught, are there... what type of tests are there to check to see for if they've learned the information for understanding?
So in all of the classes, teachers will give summative and formative assessments to check for student understanding. At the district level, we do have district common assessments where the district interventionists are working together with teachers to develop assessments based on the standards so that teachers in all the schools are giving the same kinds of assessments, and we can really dig down into that data to see where students may be coming up short. Next time we teach it, where can we bulk it up a little bit more because kids missed a certain question, and it gives teachers an opportunity to really investigate where the students are learning, where they may need some remediation. So that's occurring pretty much at all levels.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Sealander.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next thing I wanted to present to the board tonight, and I'm asking for action on this. I've talked about it a little bit in the last several weeks, but obviously we're all struggling with substitute teachers and bus drivers and a lot of these ancillary positions that are really important so that we can function as a school district. So what I've put up here for you is you can see what our current substitute pay is. For our classified staff, it's $90 per day. For our certified staff, it's $125 per day. And my recommendation is for us to elevate that to $125 per day for the classified staff and $150 per day for our certified staff. I will tell you that still places us last in terms of the low country and what they're paying their subs. However, my goal was just to get us closer, because I do still feel like it's better to sub in Dorchester 2 versus some of the other locations. And so, but those individuals who are close on the line between Berkeley County and Charleston County and Dorchester County, this at least makes it a little more hopefully appealing for them to stay and sub in our school district. So that's a recommendation I have, but I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Can I ask Dr. Robbins, you have certified daily rate. Is that a certified teacher or is that a certified substitute?
It's a certified teacher who is subbing.
And what about a non-certified substitute?
So that's $125. That's what
Okay,
that's classified.
So that's not secretaries and nurses, that is
No.
just classified,
Yeah,
gotcha,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I am all for that, by the way.
Yeah, I definitely think it makes us more competitive where we need to be. Just a quick search, and the average across the low country looks like around 147, so it actually puts us a little bit higher on the certified side. Do we know, or do you have an idea of total cost for those changes?
It really depends, but I will tell you, I don't know where you did your search, but Berkeley County and Charleston County are paying $175 per day, and I know that because I spoke directly to their superintendents. So those rates are what they are. They were at 150, but they bumped them up to start the year. So I don't know what the total cost of that would be per se. I would have to maybe take a look. It just depends on usage. You know, it depends on how many people are taking advantage. I will say this, it's going to be a year, kind of a reset year, because I am assuming that we had COVID leave as part of our scale for the last probably 18 to 24 months, where that's not there now. And so it created more sub requirements in the past 2 years because of COVID.
Yeah, I think it's something we have to do. Again, I would be interested to know, obviously that's coming out of general fund.
Correct.
What we would anticipate. I don't know if Tina, if you've run any numbers with those increases, what we would see with that.
It's a guesstimate, you know, again. Yeah. We can give you a ballpark, you know, range of what, again, what I would suggest, we look at pre-COVID historicals on how many sub days we had, and it's just multiplication after that.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ma'am.
So are we currently having a difficult time finding subs? Can you just explain that a little bit, or with
Yeah,
how that's
so
looking?
yeah, it's a challenge. We do not have enough subs, and I have Camilla and Donna sitting out there probably could, you know, articulate it much better than me. But what I will tell you is we don't have enough on a daily basis, and so what that requires us to do is to pull people in the building into those classrooms to cover, just so we have an adult body in there. You know, we're already using subs who may have a prep period based on that teacher's schedule that they don't. During that prep period, they're going to some other vacancy and trying to cover down. We have certified teachers, our teachers that are giving up their prep periods and going in and cover classrooms. We're using instructional assistants. I mean, you name it. We're using just about every person we can. We're consolidating classes where we can, and just trying to use every tool possible to make sure that there are bodies in those classrooms, because you're naturally going to have people out that are ill, and we're hopeful that this will make us more competitive and increase our fill rates. Did anything else you guys would like to add? Okay. Chicken.
Brian?
Dr. Robbins, when would this go into effect?
Pardon me?
When would this go into effect?
If you all approve it, it would go into effect however quickly personnel could update, you know, the process when we collect the sub pay, you know, for probably not this pay period, probably the next pay period would be the quickest that we could do it, as Tina's about to stroke out down there, but she'll be all right.
Assuming that we approve it tonight, can you say it's not till the next pay period, could you backdate it to today, to tonight?
Yep. We can.
Like Tina's like, ooh, Dr. Robbins like,
we
yep.
can backdate it. It would take a little work. We'd have to see what it would require. From now forward, correct.
Right.
Dr.
Make a
Ro-
motion that we accept the recommendation from Dr. Robbins for the increased uncertified and certified pay per day as presented.
Okay, I've got a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Crosby.
I'm really apologize, but you know, in 2008,
Christine, we can't,
Christine.
Christine, we can't.
Christine.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Ms. Crosby, did you second that motion?
Yes.
Okay, I have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
Dr. Robbins, does that take effect immediately?
Yes, ma'am. Next pay period as we collect. I did want to give you one other update, and I apologize. I got a little distracted. But we discussed the other pay for adult supports. We did raise that 20% this year, so it has been elevated from $75 to $90 per day, just so you know. So we're trying to take incremental bites at this the very, very best we can. So that has been increased.
Okay.
Okay. The next thing I have is your personnel report.
Okay, board members, in your packets, you should have received the recommendations and the resignations for personnel. Does anybody have a problem with doing those in open session? No, ma'am. Okay, I need a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Guthrie. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Farnsworth. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
All right, the next thing I have on the agenda is kind of it's the status of our Purple Star program. And I do have Ms. Troy here, our Chief of Military Community Relations. You know, there's been a lot of work to try to get this in place. I think I shared with the board my excitement for us to be a designated Purple Star district. There are 6 in the state of South Carolina. We would be number 7. We are the only really major district in the Low Country that's not designated a Purple Star district, so Charleston is and Berkeley is. There are criteria for us to meet in order to get to that position, and so I've asked Ms. Troy to come and share with you some of the things that are taking place. We're really close to that designation. I will also share with you and share publicly. I had a great meeting with the Joint Base Charleston base commander, he and his chief of staff, and it was funny. After his change of command ceremony, he came to my office and he asked about the program, and then he looked on my wall and he said, "I'm assuming you guys are going to work on that designation," because that's really important to his military community. We have about 1,600 military-connected children in our district, and I think we're one of the highest school districts in the state of South Carolina with military-connected children. It's advantageous when they have airmen and soldiers that are PCS and into the base, and they have dependents who may be looking for jobs, who are teachers and support staff, that we can utilize them as possible future employees. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Troy. She's been through this process before, and she can give you a little bit of an update.
Thank you, Dr. Robbins. Good afternoon, Board. Dr. Robbins. As you know, we are on track for our Purple Star program. And the Purple Star program, essentially, it is designed to meet the needs of not only the military student, but the military family as they transition into the district and as they transition out of the district. So as they're in a transition mode, we're designed to meet those needs to help them to get towards graduation. Because as you know, many times, a lot of our children have probably transitioned to various districts a good 6, 7 times. And so you want to ensure that they are on track for graduation. And in doing so, there are 5 requirements that you have to meet in order to become a Purple Star Purple Star district. The first is you have to have programs that are dedicated to the military, that highlight the military. And we've been doing that here at the district. For instance, we do things during Veterans Day. As you know, November is the month of the military child, so usually that's a time to highlight November is the month of the military family, I stand corrected, and April is the month of the military child. However, we still have military children in our districts throughout the year, so in terms of doing other things to highlight that, having groups, if that's something to deal with transitioning. Another requirement is to provide professional development, and between myself, MSEC, which is the Military Child Education Coalition, they come in, they do training. You also have MIC3, which is the Military Interstate Compact, and that's the compact that most of the states hold between each of the states that says that we're here and we're geared towards helping those children to graduate, and if there are some issues going on in terms of when they transition in, we will work together between districts and states to help those children achieve those goals of graduation. In addition to that, you also have to have a dedicated web page for your military community that provides resources and information. And I am happy to say that we do now have a page that is active. And if you get a chance, I'd love for you to go to it. If you look across the top under families and then click on military families, the page is designed as a one-stop shop. For instance, if they're looking for registration, they can click on a button for registration. Say, for instance, which oftentimes most military families, they do their research before they get here, and they have an idea of what community they want to move into or neighborhood. They may just put the address on there and say if a specific school comes up, they can click on that link. They'll find out who the military liaison is at that school if they need to get in touch with it. They'll find out if they have our student program, which is one of the requirements. The next requirement is that we have to have student ambassadors at each school. And those student ambassadors will be trained under Student to Student, which is the Military Child Education Coalition will do that. And the final requirement is that you have to have a liaison that is trained to address the needs and questions of the military community. And each school identifies that person, and we're in the processes of getting those individuals trained. I will say that MSEC is holding a summit in the Low Country for Dorchester, Charleston, and Berkeley, and Dorchester will be hosting the summit as well as training our school liaisons. On November 4th, we will train our students, our student ambassadors, November 3rd, and they're also going to have something for the military families in the community on that Saturday, November 5th, which will be hosted by MSEC. So those are essentially the requirements. So as of once we get our school liaisons trained, then we are ready to receive our designation. And so right now, we're in the process of kind of getting a date between Dr. Robbins and the individuals at Joint Base Charleston so that we can find a common date to host and have our dedication. And subject to that, I'll answer any questions that you may have.
If you look at the screen, I asked them, I know it's a little small, but you do get a chance. This is our military webpage. That has all the key links that somebody who would be moving into our community may be interested in, jobs and where our school's located, and you name it. It's all captured in that one site for them, because what we're trying to do, they have information overload when they're moving into a new assignment, and we're trying to make it a little easier for them. I've got a little welcome that I tape for them as well, and it just demonstrates that we understand what their families are going through and what they may go through if they ever have to deploy and leave their family behind.
And the page will constantly be updated with new information and resources as we get them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. The liaison that you're training, are they informed when a new student comes in that's in the military, or how does that work? Are they notified so that they can make contact with a student?
Exactly. For instance, each school will one of the things when we do the training, we suggest that each school have a welcome packet. and when that student is when they're coming into your school, that you're able to provide that. During registration time, there is actually a part on the application that asks if the parents are in the military, and how they're connected to the military. So they actually have that information and are able to see. But just for instance, if they don't know that, once they actually come into the school for registration and they're meeting the counselor and the principals, they will also be able to gather that information.
Okay. I just wondered how they kept up with them. Thank you.
And that's a state requirement in terms of on the applications that captures that information.
Now, do you cover just Dorchester County, or are you covering all 3 counties?
No, ma'am, I'm only covering Dorchester.
Thank you. Are you military?
I retired last year.
Oh, thank you so much for your service.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Farnsworth?
First and foremost, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Robbins. And the new program, I think, is phenomenal. I would tell you, of course, Dr. Robbins and I as well, being former military, you see a lot of resources towards the military member, and then sometimes the family, it can be a little bit tougher. And of course, military families are moving all over the place. So I think having that dedicated resource within the district and just having that designation as a district is a huge win for us. So I appreciate. I did have a question, and I think it goes a little bit to what Ms. Crosby was asking, because I know right now sometimes we have, it is difficult to identify sometimes our military and federal agency families. Are there components of this program that will exponentially help that process to make sure we identify? Because I think there's grants, there's monies available.
There are, and you're speaking of the impact aid funds, and the thing
Correct.
about the impact aid funds is we know who the military families are that identify themselves. For instance, on the application, when they apply for registration for the school and they identify themselves, each school can pull their own school and look at by name the individuals, the families that they have. They can capture the numbers of families that they have at the schools. And sometimes, and I always say, don't just target those particular families when you do your impact aid, but you want to target everyone, because you may miss someone who may not have clicked that form that they're a military family, but they may actually turn in the card for the impact aid form.
Yeah.
But yes,
and that's what I was getting at, because I know we identify them a lot of times, but then actually getting the information back, which then results in us getting revenue, I know can be the tough part of that.
Absolutely.
So I will tell you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know when she's done this in the past, that's the challenge. We do know we're missing some students, and I'll give you an example that I heard Ms. Troy explain, and that would be, we've got Justin, who filled out his form at Reeves elementary school, but we know Justin's brother is also obviously a military-connected child, but they didn't turn in a form for him because the families thought one form would cover all their kids. And so she'll spend an awful lot of time going through a lot of different forms to make sure we're getting everybody that's in the family, so we capture all that impact aid money.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it starts really at the school level as they're doing their due diligence and turning in the forms, just kind of making sure that, okay, well, I know I have 50 military families, and I know who they are, and at least I know that I have those, and you may have to do a second push or a third push in order to get those forms in.
And then the last piece I had, I know I spoke with you, Dr. Robbins, the other night. When we get our designation, we will celebrate. We'll have a large celebration, I think, for that upcoming.
That is correct. That's the part that I said I'm waiting for Dr. Robbins and the commander at Joint Base Charleston schedule to link up so that we can get invitations out to everyone.
So it looks like the training's going to finish right around a time that it gets a little busy because of Veterans Day. And so we're trying to get it synchronized and organized because we want our student ambassadors to participate as well. And I'm going to go ahead and share. She had a great idea that instead of doing it at a single school, we would bring our students here to the stadium behind us. And hopefully, it'd be a nice weather day where all these military-connected families our Joint Base Charleston families could all come. I've asked Colonel Freeman if he would be the guest speaker, and he said absolutely. And so we'd get as many of our VIPs invited to the event as well, and obviously including the board.
Love it. Ms. Troy, thank you.
Ms. Troy,
Very welcome.
Ms. Troy, about how many military families do we have in the district right now?
We have roughly almost 1,800. I can't
many?
remember the exact number.
many?
Somewhere between 16 and 1,800. The numbers kind of fluctuate.
I didn't know we had that many. Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Troy,
when
can
I did my research, and I don't have the most up-to-date numbers for other districts, but I know that we were somewhere between second and third in terms of districts in the state of South Carolina that had the largest amount of military students.
Can I ask Ms. Troy, thank you. We can tell you're very knowledgeable about this and you love it. You can feel the passion. Is this for just active military, or do retired military children fall into this as well?
Absolutely. And what I always say is we service the military connected family. So when we speak in terms of military connected families, we speak in terms of families that are veterans, active, reserve, National Guard. Now, when you speak in terms of the Impact Aid grant, that's different from Purple Star. They're looking at a specific set of requirements when you start speaking to the actual Impact Aid grant.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments? Ms. Rimble?
Mine was actually answered. But I will say it is nice to meet you officially and welcome. We're glad to have you here. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. I'm very
Appreciate it.
happy to be here. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairwoman Hughes, board members, Dr. Robbins. I wasn't exactly sure which reports we wanted to go over this evening because we have a new cash flow form that Dr. Robbins has shared that looks a little different than what we've presented in the past. There also in your packet are the reports that we have presented previously through year-to-date through August 31st. So you'll see our balance sheet is shown here. Some of those numbers are going to be the same as what you see on our cash flow sheet, which is next. Then the next form will be your revenues and expenditures, and again, those are shown on this cash flow analysis. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to show that on the screen because it's a little, it might be a little small whenever you get it. So there is a form, yes, on the dais for you. So this is a new report. I know that's a lot of numbers and it looks a little confusing, but it's really easy to understand. I'll explain just a little bit. So this is a cash flow analysis which shows, starting in the left-hand corner, our beginning fund balance that we had from June 30th of last year. So you're starting with that number, and then each month going across shows our projected revenues that are coming in each month, as well as our expenditures on the bottom in the red section down below. Because we don't receive monies in the same every single month. It doesn't come in the same way. Same with the expenditures. This was a great way to show where we will receive more money in some months and less money in some months, but how we will end up with our cash flow for the entire year. So the first column on the left shows the different revenue line items. Those are broken down into the first section being our local general fund revenues. So for our property taxes, fee and lieu, interest, other local sources. That's the total for our local general fund. The first two columns are July and August. Those are our actual numbers. And again, to the right of that, all in red, are the projected for the rest of the year. And you'll see all the way out to the far, far right is our general fund budget for the year. So as you're coming down, our state revenues are in the next column. In the next section for our total state general fund revenue. I should have mentioned that in August, for our local general fund revenues, just for the month, were $1 million, and then 9.2 for the state general fund revenues. And as Ms. Troy was saying, we have one federal general fund revenue, that's our impact aid, which does come in a little bit differently. We only receive that twice a year, so we didn't receive any of that in August. So our total revenues for the month of August were $10,350,000, and our expenditures were $20,106,000. $5,000. So it looks like, well, our fund balance went down that month, but as you can see, as we go out, we cover that because our revenues come in at a different time, as we said before. We have projected out that all the way through the end of the year, we will be fine. In fact, there's a little, in the far green on the right-hand bottom column, there's a $111,000 difference because we've already received enough interest income versus what we had budgeted. We weren't aware that our interest income rates, the interest rates were going to be higher for this year, which is great. So we may see a little savings in that area. And as we go through this year, we will be monitoring that and be able to bring to y'all some various savings in other areas. We haven't done a budget amendment in a few years because of COVID, but we may be able to do that this year. We'll be doing a deep dive into all of our revenues and expenditures this year, so we'll be able to present that information. So that was everything that I had on our current report. And then we also wanted to present some information about our ESSER spending. So were there any other questions on the cash flows or the August reports?
Anybody have any comments or questions? No?
Can I make one?
Absolutely.
Yes, it's obviously a new form, and I just want to thank Tina for using it. I think what it does is it allows us to share, once we're done with our board meeting, then we'll publicize this. It gives our community a really good idea of where we're forecasting our general fund to be at the end of the year. It's something I've used for over a decade, and it's, I don't want to say simple, but it's a little easier to digest than a normal budget analysis that you get every month, and people can put their eyes to it and see it. So again, some of this is worst case scenario. I told her to budget high with expenses with the hopes that it wouldn't be, because the last thing you want to do is forecast that you're going to be a balanced budget and end up in a deficit towards the end of the year. If we think we're going to have more surplus than what we're allowed to have, then she's going to come back to you and say, okay, here are some recommendations to maintain that 15% that we have to maintain right now, currently.
We
have
are
to
over
maintain.
15% right now, you're right.
Yeah.
So we will be coming back.
Yeah. But thank you, Tina.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay.
I hope it's understandable for everyone. And as the months go on, as we fill in our actuals, you'll see the colors change a little bit. So a fun, colorful report that we don't typically have in finance. As Dr. Robbins said, he had to pretty it up for me.
Tina.
Yes, sir.
We know that you guys do this every month. It's great that you showed us this information. Thank you very much.
Different format that Dr. Robbins presented, so
I
yes,
know,
I like
yeah.
it.
Just a quick question. Can you touch on the food service fund balance and that there was a
Yes,
a
that is-
negative for the month of July and August? Can you just explain for us why that was?
Yes, sir. Thank you for pointing that out. I meant to say that was on the very bottom left. We'll share with you what our food service fund balance is and what our monthly change is every month. So we didn't have students in July and August where we made claims, and so we're every month we'll be behind 1 month for the claims that we receive from the state. So we'll receive our August claims in September.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Nope.
Okay, so next we wanted to share with you our different ESSER accounts. We received 3 different allocations for ESSER. The first one was back in March of 2020, and that was for $3.5 million. And on this first ESSER spending report, you can see where our budget and the actuals, and it shows a small balance of $1,500, but I will say that as of last Friday, we have spent all of that, so we have spent 100% of this CARES money. You'll see the spending categories that were established by the state are on the first column. The middle is the description of what DD2 utilized the funding for, and then the category is just the small category of supplies or training or technology, the abbreviated category name, I mean, and the remaining funds, which again, we have spent 100% of these funds. So that's the first, they called this CARES/ESSER 1. So then we have our ESSER 2 spending report, and again, the categories from the state are on the left. We had, our allocation from the state was $18,032,269, and it was awarded in January of 2021. Those funds are eligible to be used until September 30th of 2023. So we have those budgeted out into various categories that you'll see on this page and the next. Our actuals as of, and these are actuals as of June 30th of 22. So the remaining funds at June 30th of 2022 are, I wanted to add in here that we do have $614,000 that we've used since June 30th. So we have $3,131,000 left. So we have spent 83% of our ESSER 2 funds. Only 17% remaining. And this is a reimbursable grant, so whenever we spend the money in the end of the next quarter is when you get the money, just like what we were talking about with food service. You get the money after you, in the month after you spend it. So some of the reporting that is shown on the state website is for a quarter behind. So again, as we spend, then we'll be reporting our expenditures. Is that showing up in there, or can y'all not see that?
No, we don't see. Yeah, some of us have the document, some of us don't. Yeah, neither do I.
It's under the administrative content.
So is all of this information available on the website as well?
It is under your administrative content under board docs right now, but we wanted to present it to y'all first, and then we will put it out
It will be
onto
on
our website. Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's great information, by the way, very detailed.
So then the ESSER 3, I'll just finish with reporting that information. That was awarded to us in March of 2021, and we have until September 30th of 2024 to spend those funds. We were allocated $40,526,000, and our budget in the various areas, actuals as of June 30th of 22, plus the encumbered amounts, we have remaining $30,658,000. We've spent 24%. Some of these areas, whenever we went out, the board approved this one. We had public input, the board input, principals, students, teachers. We had a lot of input in this plan. Some things have changed since then. We weren't sure exactly how much money we would need for, say, the emergency paid sick leave. So we will have some funds that are left in some different categories, and Dr. Robbins and I are going to look and meet with the leadership and come up with some areas of change that we could bring to y'all for an amendment that we could go out to the public and present an amendment that would be submitted to the state, and just to be able to utilize some funds in some different areas. I apologize y'all aren't able to see that.
So can you explain that again, how it works to make that amendment?
So for this pot of money, it was a state requirement that we had to have public input.
I remember. Yeah. So do we need to do that again to have an amendment? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So we'd have public input, and then it would come before the board, and we would vote
To send it to the state as an amendment. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And they have to approve it. Okay. But it does seem like some of this isn't necessarily relevant anymore, thank goodness, right?
Absolutely.
So we need amendments for sure. Yes.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions or comments for Tina?
We'll be sure to get that out there so you can see it. I apologize for that.
Okay, so I think at this point I'm going to need a motion to accept the financial report as information. Mr. Mitchell made that motion. Ms. Wimberly seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Robbins. Short and sweet report tonight. Got a lot going on. A lot of that stuff is documents being uploaded to OSF for several projects. The highlight is on Thursday, we have the bid openings for the 4 roofing projects around the district, and I'm eager to see where those come in, and hopefully we can get everything done we've got on the plate there with the funds we have available. One thing I did want to mention was a discussion between myself, Dr. Robbins, and Ms. Meunier. We talked about the capital improvement program last week, and we looked through the facility study, and we're building a framework on how to best attack our capital needs throughout the district. And I think with a few more conversations, we're going to have that framework. We're going to have a plan for immediate needs, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, and 5 years down the road. I think within the next few months, we can probably formulate something that is going to actually impact our district as far as capital improvements, actual capital improvements. So that's a discussion ongoing, and we're going to keep that conversation alive. And that's going to be one of the main things we're going to be working on in the near future.
It was a really good meeting with the 3 of us after we had met and with the architects and gone over the facility study. Just for me, my past experience of creating a 3-year capital projects plan, it will allow us to look at that per site location, and then we update it every year. And some things we'll get to. Financially, we might not be able to get to some things, and from an emergency perspective, we may have to bump something up, but it gives Tony's team a blueprint. It gives the board a blueprint on the things that are taking place across the district, so that we don't wake up one day and we got to replace all of our roofs, or we have to replace all of our HVAC systems. They're all, it just gives us a good working document for boards to come, superintendents to come down the road for them to look at. So I really appreciate his work on that and spending time with Tina and taking a look at those numbers and what can we and can't we do. Because if you look at it, it's overwhelming at the dollar amounts, but if you take it little chunks at a time, then it becomes a little more manageable, wouldn't you say?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Souls, you said you had 4 small projects you're still working on?
Pardon?
You said you had 4 projects that you still had to...
Yes, ma'am. We're working on the DO Annex right back here, which we changed the scope of that. Those design documents are being done right now and going to be uploaded in the OSF portal for them to review it. The HVAC upgrades span has already been uploaded into the portal. They finished up with the field work last week at Knightsville. Those design documents will be uploaded into the portal this week. And the restroom renovations, all of those design documents for Austin and Greg gym restrooms, those will be uploaded in the portal within the next 2 weeks. So as soon as they're uploaded into the portal, there's a design review process that OSF has to go through. Then we can put those jobs out to bid.
Those bathrooms were bad.
They're not in the greatest of shape, and we need help. And this is the framework for our next summer's projects.
Right.
So next summer, we're going to be doing rooftops. We're going to be changing HVAC systems. We're going to be upgrading renovations in the gym. We're going to be doing all this stuff next summer. So that's why, and with the way the world is right now, we don't know when the materials for all this is going to be available. That's why we want to get the jump on it today and not wait until April to try to bid something out that we can't get material for until September of next year. So it's just, we're trying to be proactive and jump on this thing as quickly as possible to get it done, bid out, and so the awarded contractors can start locating materials for the jobs.
I appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Sauls. Okay, so does that complete your? Yes. Okay, next on the agenda then is old business. And we are going to begin with our board policies for second reading, and I'll turn that over to our policy chairman, Mr. Farnsworth.
Good deal. Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the policies, I would ask the board, we've got policies obviously in your packet on board docs for second reading. I think it's probably, it would probably make sense, because I think there's going to be some conversation according to what we heard earlier around policies BGD and then the accompanying rule BGDR. So I would just ask, first order of business, if we can approve, if nobody has any objection, if we could approve the remainder of the policies for second reading in this slate of policies, and then we can discuss BGD and BGDR.
Okay, that's coming from the committee. So coming from the committee, we need no second. So is there any discussion on the policies that was Mr. Farnsworth stated? Okay, I need a motion to approve those. Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor? 7-0.
And then from there, certainly open to entertain any conversation and see what direction we want to go. You know, BGD, BGDR, board policy process, board review. Certainly heard some comments earlier. We had gotten some concerns expressed to us from the community. Again, I think it's up to the board what direction we want to go. I would just tell you, looking at the language of the updated policy, again, I think we have to look at the history of where it's come from. It went through committee, it went through first reading, it's now up for second reading. The language is based on a model policy, so from SCSBA, it was not just language that we created as a district. But again, it is kind of interesting to see the language is already there. I think the comments and concerns we heard earlier talking about, I don't know where it's coming from, removing parental rights to do something. I don't know. It seems like that's been twisted a little bit, unfortunately. Because again, if you look at the policy as it's written today, in policy today, and historically it's been there for a long time, we're not changing that language. I happen to agree as far as one place for everything to go through as far as policies go. I agree, and Dr. Robbins and I spoke earlier. I think that needs to go through the superintendent's office as far as it being in writing, all that sort of stuff. And again, that's not different than what we do today. That's in policy today. We're just kind of cleaning up the language and polishing that language. So again, I'm more than happy we can take it back to policy committee for further conversation and just figure out what we want to do on those policies. But happy to entertain questions or.
Well, one of the things I shared with Mr. Farnsworth is, you know, it's not a recommendation from the superintendent. The policy decision-making always has and always will rest with the board. That's your primary goal. I'm the conduit. So, for example, the way policies are generated today, if it affects finance, it's going through the CFO. If it affects operations, it's going through Tony Souls. If it affects curriculum, it's going to go through Mr. Doherty and Karen Radcliffe. Personnel, Donna Goodwin, Camilla. So it goes through those folks who will have to implement the policy, because that's our job. You create it, and it's our job to make sure that we follow it. And my office and the superintendent is just simply the conduit so that it's not coming from all different locations. But again, it's in terms of how involved I typically am. That's why we have an in-house attorney, and she manages it. And again, the policy making is the role of the board. So.
Ms. Wimberly?
And I agree, and I think that is what's happening, but I do think there is some question, just the verbiage, the language in the policy that I think bears taking a second look at. I think the way it's worded, I mean, using the recommendation under recommendation implies that there could be circumstances where we aren't deciding whether or not a policy should be heard or looked at or moved forward. And obviously we are doing that, but if there's question in the language, I think it's worth taking a second look at it.
Okay, any other discussion?
I just want to say, as often through the years as I've been on a policy committee, we would be in error if we didn't reach out to the superintendent. People that are in the day-to-day, every day, they're the experts, not us. And so it would be foolish of us to make policy without bringing them into it. And they do have a committee that they work it out. They bring it to us. We ask questions. We get it back, the questions answered, usually through Christy. And we tweak things that we want to tweak as a board. So just for the public to know, the superintendent never dictates to this board in the 12 years I've been here anything. But as Ms. Wimberly said, it's not sometimes what is said, it's how it got said. So if we need to tweak something, even though I think we're doing an excellent job. And I'm okay with if you wanted to pull it, Mr. Farnsworth, and take a look, it wouldn't hurt. But I will say this in defense of the board, we would be foolish if we didn't pull them in and ask them, and ask him. We hired him to manage the whole district. So if we ignored what he said, we would not be good stewards for our community. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, and again, just to read the language to be very clear, the current policy today, upon recommendation from the superintendent, that's the current language. Looking at what the potential new language is, upon recommendation from the superintendent. It's the exact same. We've had that in place for decades. I've been on this board for 8 years. I've never questioned it. I think it's unfortunate that somehow or another it could be misread, I think, for the wrong reasons. 100%, I will support whatever the board wants to do. We've been through the process. So I would put it up for a vote, I suppose, if we want to vote on it and just put it through tonight, or if we want to take it back to committee. Either way is fine with me.
Can I add one more thing? So, because I've been doing this a long time too, and that is, I think it's really good that our district uses the School Boards Association, which they provide us with the model policies, which incorporate any case law that would require some type of modification or amendment. You get all those. Bar none, you get all those to look at and make a decision. So again, it's not, this office doesn't have the authority to keep that from coming to you. All we do is make recommendations so that you understand what implementing a policy or approving a policy would do in terms of how we operationally utilize it. Understand the verbiage, but this, and again, I'm indifferent to it, but the School Boards Association obviously has a reason why they've used model language the way they have, so everything is always up for interpretation, but so you'll get everything always.
Well, just because there's been question, I feel comfortable with it. You might just change your word instead of recommendation, input. You know, one word might calm everybody down from their concerns, but it does come from the legal people at the state. So I feel comfortable, but because there's questions, I also feel fine pulling it just for this time. And we may not change anything, but we might want to discuss it.
Well, we also have the opportunity to, if we pull it and we go back and we revisit it, we can take it back to the state and tell them the concerns we have, and maybe they can, maybe they haven't had this approach before, and maybe they even change their recommendation for the language to try to compensate for the, you know, what's being misread or whatever. But certainly, it's our duty to reach out to the people who are having to implement and the people who are being affected by our policies. It's our duty to reach out to them to get their input. And I don't think when it says it's coming from the superintendent, I don't think it means literally coming from the superintendent. What it means is the superintendent's designees, which are the people within the district that are implementing these policies. So he's not telling us what to do or what policies to put in place. Our people who are implementing them are doing that, and I think that's our job, is to try to make life easier and functional with our people in the districts, almost like the State House coming in and telling Dorchester 2 how to spend a county's money. You know, it's the same scenario. They don't know what's going on in our district. we're the best ones to make that decision. Our people are the best ones to make those decisions on policies, and that's why we ask for their input. So I'm okay with it going back to committee and possibly calling SCSBA and talking to the legals there and finding out if there is another, just a tweaking of the words.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you, we've already started that process. I spoke with Christy earlier today, and so I know she's already reaching out to SCSBA. And so we'll get that information. We can certainly take them out, come back to the policy committee, perfectly okay. I would also be remiss, because from time to time, and I've read it and I've seen it, it's unfortunate, we get accused that once the train starts rolling on a policy, there's no stopping it. There's no brakes to that train. And so I just want to use tonight as an example that there is a defined process for our policy. It goes through committee, it goes through first reading, it goes through second reading. And so they're very realistic, and there's been multiple policies where we have done this, where we can pull it back, slow down, and say, hey, let's get more information. So again, I get a little tired of the slap in the face of folks saying, once it's started, you're going to do what you want. It's just not true.
This is definitely a part of the process, and that's the reason why we do this. So that's why we have 3 readings.
You got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we need to vote to send that back to committee. So I need a motion to send that BG/BGD and BG/BGDR back to committee.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Mr. Farnsworth. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Wimberly. Any further discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Farnsworth. Yeah. Okay. Next up is, I think board members will remember a discussion that we had a few months back about some property and that we were talking about selling. Christy is going to lead us in that discussion. I think she has some answers for us on that.
Good evening, Chairman Hughes, members of the board, Dr. Robbins, thank you. You all may remember back in May of 2021, it feels like a long time ago, the board voted unanimously to dispose of a piece of property at 410 West Smith Street. This is a very small piece of property located behind a recycling center and landfill. It is landlocked. It does not have any roads that actually connect into the property, and because of its size and location, it was not particularly useful to the district. It had been donated to the district quite some time ago, and that was very timely considering the new state statute regarding disposal of school district property that's not being used and not part of a plan. So the district is selling that property to the county, who does have an intended use for it, which is excellent. And we are prepared to move forward with closing on that. And in doing so, the county has asked that the board pass a resolution confirming that Ms. Hughes, as board chair, is qualified to sign the closing documents, related documents, and the deed. So if you all don't mind, I will read that resolution and then the board can vote. The undersigned, being all the members of the Board of Trustees of Dorchester School District 2, a political subdivision of the state of South Carolina, do hereby unanimously consent to the adoption of the following resolutions. Whereas the district in Dorchester County, a political subdivision of the state of South Carolina, entered into a real estate purchase agreement with an effective date of August 23, 2022, wherein the district agreed to sell the property shown and depicted as 3 acres on a plat recorded in the Dorchester Register of Deeds office in Plat Book A, page 186, formerly Plat Book 12, page 144, bearing TMS number 14508000019 in Dorchester County, South Carolina, in consideration for $105,000.00. And whereas the Board of Trustees has duly noticed meeting on May 24th, 2021, and unanimously approved the sale of the property to the county, and whereas the Board of Trustees had a duly noticed meeting on September 26th, 2022, wherein Cynthia Hughes, as her capacity as the chair of the Board of Trustees, was unanimously approved to be the signatory on all documents related to the sale of the property to the county, including but not limited to the deed, settlement statement, and any other document necessary to convey the property to the county. Now therefore, be it resolved, it is in the best interest of the district to convey the property to the county on the terms and conditions set forth in the agreement, and be it further resolved that Cynthia Hughes, in her capacity as the chair of the Board of Trustees, is authorized and directed for and on behalf of the district to take any and all actions to cause the district to fully perform its obligations pursuant to the agreement, and to act as signatory on the deed from the district to the county and any other documents, agreements, and instruments as may be necessary or convenient to effect the conveyance of the property to the county, all on such terms and conditions as Ms. Hughes shall deem necessary or appropriate to effectuate the agreement's terms and conditions, the execution thereof to be conclusive evidence of the authorization. Be it further resolved that all actions taken in good faith on behalf of the district by the Board of Trustees of the district prior to the date hereof, which would have been authorized by these resolutions, are hereby ratified, approved, and accepted. Any questions on that?
Good job.
Thank you.
Can I make that motion to approve this resolution for the sale of this property? I will make
Okay,
that
I have a
motion.
motion from Ms. Robinson. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Guthrie. Any further discussion? Ask, did you get your answer, Ms. Crosby? Okay. Okay. All in favor? 7-0. Thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda is public comments. And I apologize for not reading the public comments.
Madam Chair, I am so sorry. We have new business on there. Can I mention something very, very quickly?
Mm-hmm.
And it's for the benefit of the district. And I hate to even have to mention it, but I'm sure, hopefully everybody saw Ray Anderson from North Charleston. He passed away.
Are you kidding me?
No, Ray Anderson from the city of North Charleston. So I at least wanted to mention that. I know that's very, very sad news for the city, for the mayor. That's the mayor's right-hand man. That's the special assistant to the mayor. Yeah, so that news just came out, so I wanted to at least make mention of it and send our condolences. I know we'll all be thinking and praying for him, so praying for his family. So just wanted to mention that.
Okay, we're going to, thank you, Mr. Farnsworth. We're going to move on to our public comments. 3 minutes per person. 3 minutes per person at the end of each board meeting will be devoted to input from citizens on items within the scope of the board's duties. Comments must be on items within the scope of the school board's duties. Speakers are required to complete a sign-in card 5 minutes prior to the beginning of the board meeting. Speakers will be recognized by the chairman to speak for no longer than 3 minutes per speaker. The board has set aside 20 total minutes for public comment. The total length of time allowed for public comment may be expanded at the discretion of the board chairman as the circumstances warrant. First person up to speak is Jason Brockert.
Well, good evening, Madam Chair, DD2 Board, and Mr. Robbins. It's unfortunate to have to follow up on sad news, so condolences from everybody. On a lighter note, I'd like to say that I'm rather impressed with the board docs that have been rolled out. I know there's still going to be some work to do, but in reviewing, in reviewing tonight's board meeting agenda, I found significantly more information significantly more easily than ever before. So as I go through and get a little bit more, I do want to echo a little bit of the comments about the policy review, though I know the verbiage and how it is, that what faces the other side of the desk is that we don't get to see it in quite the same clarity. The policy committee meeting that got moved to a Monday afternoon, and I get it, schedules are schedules, and it's not convenient for anybody most of the time. But when those things happen with little notice, obviously it gives the perception that maybe it's not trying to be done in the most forthright manner. So just that little piece of information about perception. So I do appreciate all the work that's going into it, and I look forward to seeing how much better it gets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brockert. Next up is Karima Hines. Good evening.
Hey, Superintendent Robbins. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Okay. I work for transportation. We're having a shortage, as we all know. The states are having a hard time. We had started off last year, COVID had hit, and they had started off with incentives for the drivers that's doing all of these double backs and these extra pickups, and the way they're combining the routes, making our routes longer. They're not wanting to pay us for that. I'm believing that, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and a few others, that it's unfair. They started it last year. It was a good incentive for us to have the incentives. It was giving us that drive, that push, and it just got taken away from us. I'm asking you to please reconsider. I mean, we're trying to get drivers in. We're trying to keep them, but a word of mouth goes a long way. When some people new come into a district as big as this and take in things that they're hearing, which I'll say is hearsay, if they're not seeing it or doing it for themselves, they're going on hearsay, and it's putting a bad taste in their mouths with working with us or us keeping them. So across the state, we realize it's hardship for the teachers, the bus drivers, our monitors, but without us, the bus drivers and the monitors, the teachers wouldn't be in the classroom. And I want to regenerate on that because I spoke to a lot of teachers. We're losing them. And a lot of it, too, it has a lot to do with the children's behaviors. You know, we're getting put on so much under that driving behind that wheel. It's not only driving them to and from, it's the safety, it's being their mom on the bus, making sure they're okay when they're on the bus, when they get off the bus. We're counseling them. It's a lot. And I'm just asking y'all to please reconsider. And I have gone through my chain of command, speaking to my supervisor. I spoke to Mr. Schultz. I even spoken to Mr. Anthony. And we're hoping that it's not being pushed under the rug. We're being told that, oh, we're working on it, and it's not being done. So I came in this evening to just give y'all a little taste of what we're dealing with, and letting y'all know a lot of us love the job, but that love that we have for the job is very minimum. And it's through the kids that we deal with on an everyday that's allowing us to continue to press on. So I'm asking y'all, please help us. Help us to want to do better. Help us to continue to keep us driving those buses, not for ourselves, because, you know, we have families. It's other means, but then at the same time, others have children in the district. My child's an 11th grader here. She's been here all her life. You know, if I transfer her now, it's not going to make or break it. But I'm asking y'all, please reconsider and help get us with the incentives again. Thank y'all so much for hearing me.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Next up is Victoria Singleton. Victoria Singleton? She left? Okay. Okay, so that's all of our public comments. And I need a, do I have a list of what the executive session's about? Okay, I need a motion to go into executive session. Doesn't say. It doesn't say. Okay, here we go. Discussions of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements and a discussion of a contractual negotiations. And did we have any personnel that needed to be? No personnel. Okay, so I need a motion to go into executive session for those reasons.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Guthrie. Do you have a second? Second by Mr. Farnsworth. Any discussion? All in favor? 7, Ms. Crosby? 7-0. Okay, we are going to be in executive session and we'll return for any action needed. I need a motion to go back into open session.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Guthrie. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Wimberly. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. No action to be taken coming out of executive session, so I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Mr. Guthrie, second by Mr. Farnsworth. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Have a great evening, everyone.